Welcome back to Tell a Sister, our original interview series featuring some of the most creative people in the design industry. With an appreciation for American craft heritage and fresh takes rooted in traditional design, Tell a Sister is a forum and creative roundtable on entrepreneurship, inspiration, and all things decorative arts. We recently sat down with the ever-inspiring multi-hyphenate Jennifer Ash Rudick. Jennifer is a best-selling author, Emmy-nominated documentary filmmaker, and a journalist. Her titles include Summer to Summer, Houses by the Sea, Beach Chic, and Out East, Houses and Gardens of the Hamptons, just to name a few. From painted flea market finds to no-fuss fabrics and unexpected wall colors, Jennifer shares her experiences from visiting and documenting some truly influential summer homes. During our interview, we were transported from our NYC studio to virtually visit Driftwood, Baxter's Island, Isola Bella, and more, including our family's summer house in Maine. So without further ado, pour yourself a refreshing beverage, relax, and enjoy our conversation with Jennifer Ash Rudick.
Well, good morning. We are here today with Eliza, my daughter, and Jennifer Ash Rudick, who we're so excited to talk to. And we are talking about summer houses. Summer is around the corner, thank God. And I think we're all looking forward to thinking about our own summer houses or other people's and trips we're going to take and what inspires us as Sister Parish. Just cool things about summer houses. And Jennifer is the author of Summer to Summer, one of my favorite books. She also is an award-winning documentarian, an author of several books. And Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into being a writer and a filmmaker and your relationship with the home industry, let's call it.
Okay. So I always wanted to be a journalist or tell people stories. I'm fascinated by people, and so I was working in publishing. My first job was at Fairchild Publications, and then I went to Random House, and I worked at Clarkson and Potter. And somebody asked me if I would like to write a book on Palm Beach, and I thought they meant like a scandal book, and I wasn't too interested in that. And then they said there is a series of books called Private Paris, Private London, Private New York, and I said, well, I could do Private Palm Beach. And so that was my first book, and I did that book in the 1990s. And then I kind of took, I freelance wrote for magazines, for Town and Country and W and Forbes and just a lot of magazines.
Well, your books have beautiful photographs and also beautiful storylines, and we're focusing on Summer to Summer. It's the season, so we thought we'd start with my grandmother's house in Maine, which is in the book. And so this house is interesting in that it currently has 4 generations in it. So my grandmother bought it in the 40s with my grandfather, and it was really their house just for the two of them. Now my mother is there, age 88. I'm there with my brothers and wives and our children, and now children's children. Right. So
a lot of people
sort of will look at pictures of the house and how it's changed, but kind of want to talk to you about when you went to all these different houses, like the different ways that generations fit into houses. I think that's like a challenge for people, and how there's rooms for children playing or watching movies, and then the parents someplace else, like the different approaches you've seen in summer houses to intergenerational living.
Well, my first thought is, not everyone, but people tend to think, oh, okay, when I get that summer house or that house, I want a room for the grandchildren, I want a room for, my children, I need a room for this and that. And then you go and visit people in their houses, and everybody's living in 2 rooms.
Right.
And they all want to be together.
Right.
Or they're outside in the summer.
Right.
So I think big houses are kind of overrated, although they are beautiful and a privilege and an honor, and I love going to them and photographing them, and especially the Ramblers where people have added on over time because their families have grown. But you can have a multi-generational family house in any size or shape. And it's just all about making it reflective of your family. It's such a privilege to go into people's houses and see how they figured it out. And to see what's grown around them that they don't even see. I think going into these houses gives people an opportunity to see their houses again.
Yeah.
And that's been a great privilege to see them,
Yeah.
you know, fall in love with their houses all over again. The other thing I thought of when you said you were starting with your house is that's the house I started with.
Yeah.
When I was, you know, the way I ended up doing this book is the photographer Tria Giovanni and I wanted to do a book on craftspeople. And we were so excited. We wanted to memorialize American artisans. And I know your family has always been into that. Your grandmother, your great-grandmother always, you know, was a supporter of female artisans and quilt makers and hook rug makers.
Yeah.
And we really wanted to do that. And we thought, well, where's the audience? You know, how will this work? Blah, blah, blah. And then we stood up from our meeting, you know, promising to think more about it, which is kind of a no, by the way.
Yeah.
And then we all said, well, where are you going? And, you know, the publisher is going here for the summer, the photographer here. And I said, why don't we just do a book on summer houses? And he said, done. And
Yeah,
so
right.
then I was already had artisans on my mind. And I said, you know, if I'm going to do a book on summer houses, the first house I really have to get is the summer house.
Yeah, I think our house is American crafts and
Yes.
collecting. And as you look at the house, you see generations of people adding things.
Well, there's a lot of American crafts mixed with that was what Sister was known for, like mixing it with like 18th century furniture and things like that.
Yeah.
19th century furniture.
Right,
Yeah.
and painted wicker and
Right,
you
she
know,
mixed it all up.
which is just magical.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
Yes.
it's and that's a hard, you know, that can be a challenging look to get because this has been done over generations, but you have to start somewhere and it's
Right.
not impossible to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And in the summer there are fantastic, you know, summer fairs and flea markets. And you go, and if you really take your time, there's a lot of beauty in those flea markets. And you take it out of the context of, you know, you go to a booth and someone has 30 wicker chairs and this and that. It looks like a mess and you're just kind of overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And if you just take one chair and then you put it in a bedroom at the foot of the bed, and suddenly it's a beautiful chair, and if you repaint it, you know,
Yes.
you give life to all these wonderful things.
Totally. I mean, that's part of our kind of company ethos, is, quote, sustainable luxury, finding old things and making them new again. We're going to be at Brimfield, and we're excited to see people get their finds. But yeah, my grandmother painted these these oak Victorian chairs, and that was considered in the 60s like a really renegade thing to do. They actually wrote that it was like a decorating shot heard around the world to paint these chairs. But we'll see that a lot in the houses we look to. So I think that is part of what we try to express. Finding things
Right.
is so important because it's the finding that's part of, you know,
The story of the house.
story of the
Right,
house.
absolutely.
And the summer house is very much that way.
I think Sister, my great-grandmother lived very formally.
Uh-huh.
So it was originally much more formal in how she lived in the space. And my
Yeah.
grandmother, her daughter, is extremely informal. And I would say was definitely attracted to Sister's love for American crafts more than, you know, her passion for like fancy upholstered furniture. Like my
Right.
great-grandmother loves the American craft component. So that's also been interesting to see the house evolve to become more of something my grandmother, a piece of my great-grandmother that my grandmother was most attached to now has kind of become more of the soul of the house.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I photographed once a very fancy house in Southampton. It's not in this book. It was in the book called Out East.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful house, but when the woman who inherited it, it had all this fancy furniture and quite nice, by the way, American turn of the century antiques. And she said to herself, I read somewhere that Sister Parish painted a lot of stuff white, and then in turn, Mark Hampton painted a lot of stuff white.
Yeah.
And she said, if they can do it, I can do it. And
Yeah.
she painted all that furniture
Yes.
white, and it looks amazing.
It just lifts it up.
Yeah.
There's like wood does not have to be sacred.
Also, that's bold to do something that
Uh-huh.
that was bold with Sister, because no one did it at that point. And I think
Yeah.
that's actually a great
Yes.
transition to the next house.
The next house we're going to talk about is Isola Bella, which is quite close to our house on a private island. And I think one of the interesting things, there's so many interesting things about
We're
this
on
house.
an island, and this is on its own private
It's on
island
its
next
own
door.
private island. And talking about entrances, at the summer house you were saying you entered through Apple's studio garage. This house you come to by boat, and you walk up a path with the most outrageous ferns, and the landscaping is quite incredible. It's a Peter Penoyer house, and the owner was an interior designer architect herself.
She loved chartreuse, which chartreuse green, and she asked the contractors to leave the walls in plaster, and she went to Home Depot and she got sheets and sheets of bamboo, and she painted them chartreuse and had them put up on the wall. And it reminded her of being in Italy with her grandmother.
And the way it reads when you come into the house, or when you
Yes.
come into that room, is texture,
Yes.
subtle texture. And so I think a lot of the thing with summer houses too is there are all sorts of visceral feelings that people attach with memories they have of other houses, like mothballs is something that people smell a lot of times when they come into a summer house, and
Yeah.
it's like a feeling, it's very visceral. So people bring a lot of
That
their
makes sense then.
their
Oh,
memories of her grandmother. And so just in terms of a trick of the trade, how incredible to do something like that, so simple and so amazing.
Well, the floor is incredible.
Oh, yeah,
So the
yes.
floor is good old-fashioned terrazzo
Okay.
with shards of stone from the island.
Oh.
Yeah, and that is something that the owner and Peter Penoyer came up with. And it's just beautiful. The pool is sensational, it overlooks the Camden Hills.
Yeah.
And it's a saltwater pool.
Right.
And it's
Built
not
into the rocks.
heated. And in Maine, that's saying something. It's
Yeah.
unusual to have a pool in Maine at all, but
Yeah.
she did make it look very natural. Yeah.
And I think also the facade, because that's the other thing obviously with the architecture of any house is how you feel when you come to it.
You get off on the little boat, someone leads you up this hill, it's like hiking in the Adirondacks or something, and then you arrive to this clearing. They didn't make a driveway, nothing. It's just a grassy clearing, and you see this house. And it looks like it's been there forever, and they did design it to be look like somebody from Maine had gone on the grand tour in Europe in
Yeah.
the 17th or 18th century.
They have these incredible panels over the front door that you can maybe talk about, Jennifer, that are really kind of wild.
So they're wild, they're whimsical, they make the house personal, they're called graffito. I'm guessing that the term graffiti comes from this, but
Yeah.
I'm not, don't quote me.
Yeah.
But, she and Peter Penoyer came up with this note. Peter is such a great historian, but he
Yeah.
also has a little bit of whimsy and everything.
Yeah.
And so they came up with this idea, and the proportion is just right.
The next house we're going to talk about is on Fisher's Island, and it's called Willowdale, and it's a documentary filmmaker, Albert Maysles, who Jennifer worked with on Iris, and he did movies like Gimme Shelter, Grey Gardens. This house is, to me, a good example of a multi-generational house where everybody has brought something to it. But what I want to talk about, or one of the things that Jennifer and you and Eliza can weigh in, is the color. Like, it almost looks Italian to me with the colors that they used.
It does.
Is this flat paint?
It's flat paint on plaster walls. These are the colors that were original to the house, and so maybe pumped up a little. But so every time they work on the house, they try to keep it as it originally was.
You don't have to paint houses pale blue, white hydrangea. You can go toward the deep hues
Absolutely.
if that's what makes you feel good.
Right.
And different colors make different people feel different ways. So these are deep,
Right.
deep hues. What does it feel like when you're in the house?
It feels so rich and dreamy and transportive, really.
Mm.
And it's very much like, for example, the black house we just saw. Green in the summer pops against black. It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
These colors look fantastic in the summer. And, you know, Noah Baumbach was very inspired by this house,
Yeah.
filmmaker Noah Baumbach.
People think everything has to be new and perfect. It's the opposite. And I think this house is very much a collector's house.
Absolutely.
Like, look at this kitchen.
And,
Looks
yeah.
like they like to cook.
Right, they
And-
love to cook. They do. There's a tag sale every Saturday morning, I believe, on Fisher's Island. They go to that, and that's how they keep the furniture going.
Yeah. So this is an example where you see a lot of love in a house that is finished in its own way.
Absolutely.
Which will lead us to our next house, which is very different because it's a designer house. Tom Shearer decorated it on Nantucket, and that one is called Driftwood.
You know, it is different because a decorator did it. However, Tom Shearer is a genius about this, and no one knows summer houses like Tom Shearer. You know, in my book Out East, his family's summer house
Yeah.
is in that book.
Yeah.
And he understands how generations live in a house, and how summer houses have to be casual. They have to withstand bathing suits and sand and salt. So when he redid this house, it had been done with a lot of silk and damask, and he took all that out, changed it all to linens and cottons, and the few new things that he had to buy, he would take the things from the main house and put them out in the guest houses.
Yeah.
And so he did repurpose everything in the house.
Yeah.
He hates when I say that because he's like, I'm a decorator, I should be buying people things, but he's a great repurposer. He can't help himself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is something we believe in too. Like just
Yes, and I think a client really does look for that in a decorator.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that, I mean, you have to really come in and get to know people and what they already own. Really, a lot of it, like we say, people feel attached to their things. They have, like, all these things have stories behind them. And so, especially in a summer house where you have a lot of time, hopefully you can just kind of be quiet in your summer house and really enjoy the rooms and the spaces. Sometimes at home it's hard to do
Yeah,
that.
I think
Yeah.
what he did well in this house too, and where a room where people aren't quiet, is I can tell there's a party barn,
Oh, yeah.
which I think every house should have if there's teenagers around, or a place where kids can go and you know there's great music playing. And
Right.
they have sort of a gallery wall here, but what's this room like in person, Jennifer?
It was a garage bay, and when you're in it, it's just totally alive. And
Yeah.
it was, you know, Tom said it started out as a catch-all, and then he kind of, you know, ended it and played with the catch-all and turned it into a party room.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's great.
Yeah, so there's no reason a garage has to have just a big old leather sofa or something. You can doll it up, and it can be everyone's favorite room in the house.
Yeah, it's really good. I love the upholstery mixed with the wicker and
I think you see restaurants, things in like the city trying to capture this vibe.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so then the last house we're going to talk about is Ken Falk's house in Provincetown.
Yeah.
And the thing about that house that strikes me, we talked about a lot of family, intergenerational, that seems like a community house where Provincetown is very much part of the town,
Mhm.
the community, part
Yeah.
of his world there. Like,
And Ken is the mayor. Yes.
okay, he's the mayor,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
talking about having
Yeah.
stoop drinks with John Darien
Uh,
on his steps.
Uh-huh.
Like that's a lot of summer houses are in communities, and people
Right.
do drop in, and they are part of a bigger picture.
Which
So-
is, you know, brings up, you know, nothing pretentious in a summer house.
Yeah.
Because you're gonna leave the door open,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So this really is a community, this house belongs to the town.
yeah,
It was a boarding house, it was jacked up on a car jack when they bought it, and they restored it. But they restored it so that it would not fall into the water. They did not make it precious or perfect
Yeah.
or put, you know, to my knowledge, it doesn't have air conditioning, nothing like that. They just wanted it to be safe and sound.
Yeah.
And it is, and everything in this house is from a thrift shop nearby. And it's just amazing to be in.
I love the gate.
Like
That's
a
made out of
gate.
driftwood, but it's so perfect.
With the heart.
With the heart.
Yeah, now that's on the water side.
I love
and
that.
it's just wonderful. And the dogs run out of there and they play in the sound in the morning.
What's the yellow like that he used in that room with the quilt on the bed? Is it mustardy or?
It's mustardy. It's just on the safe side of a school bus yellow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's very near, but
Yeah.
it's not there. Yeah, and it's fantastic.
So
and
he bought
it's-
everything locally, you said? Sorry, just to cut you
Yeah.
off. So everything's from local flea markets and things?
Everything's from local flea markets. Although, you mentioned the flea market,
Brimfield.
Brimfield.
Yeah.
Some things are from Brimfield. He likes to go over to Brimfield.
Yeah.
Yeah. But everything, the paintings are local. He has all these dog portraits upstairs. He loves dogs.
I think when people think about their houses, like what we're coming back to is, just being local craftsmen, local antique stores.
How do you want to feel?
Yeah, how do you want to
Ken
feel
Falk
in
has
the
designed the
house?
most beautiful, fancy houses, and I love that this definitely shows that when he's there, he wants to feel like he is part of the town.
Right.
His friends from
Near and
near
far.
and far feel welcome.
They do all come, by the
Yeah.
way. Everybody comes to visit Ken
Yeah.
then. I don't know how he keeps up his
Yeah.
energy and I don't know how he keeps food in the house.
Yeah.
These houses, they're all inviting,
Right.
and you kind of take a breath when
Yeah.
you arrive. Because, to summer houses, you travel to summer houses.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to get to them.
No, it's usually
You know,
hard. The
it's-
better ones are harder to
Yeah.
get to. And we live such busy lives and we're all kind of exhausted a lot of the time, let's be honest.
Right.
And
yeah.
so just to be able to read a book and think about, step back a little bit,
Mhm.
I think is what people are looking for in a summer house. So this has been great, Jennifer. We're all really looking forward to summer. And I find this book extremely inspiring. I look at it all the time for ideas, and I love the stories of the people. So
And I hope that it brings all of you guys who are watching the confidence to tell your own story in your own summer house. I think all of these people are just so confident in how they design their houses. It's just like you said it so well, that if you love it, then it's right.